it is inflation and it is housing prices. And it's all of these things colliding together, which really do make it impossible. You can make $90,000 a year, but if your milk goes from $4 to $6 a gallon, and you have kids, it makes a difference on the bottom line of that budget. So we really are, with this bill that I've been so honored to be introduced to, we're really seeing proponents across the state come together to say we have to prioritize children.
Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of. Together, I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. Kathleen, so glad to have you with me. I've been waiting for this episode with you because housing is at the forefront of conversations across the country. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself, what you work on, and why you're here today?
Wonderful. No, thank you. I'm honored to be here today with you. I work with the Community Investment Alliance. I am their CEO. We work statewide across Colorado on housing as well as on homelessness, really working at the local level in multiple communities, including rural communities, to focus on in their area how we can increase affordable housing, how we can maintain stability for those who are housed, maintain our affordable housing units that we have, and then also make sure that for those who are falling out into housing insecurity, what we're doing to get them quickly back into housing so that we don't continue to see an increase in homelessness.
How did you end up in this career path?
Oh, I have worked in housing and homelessness for 13 years now. I was honored to grow up in a household where my mom worked with Habitat for Humanity and was able to really see the impact of housing even back in the 90s that we were facing here in Colorado, and starting to see the gentrification and the needs. And so it really spurred a lot of my interest, not only in the housing and the homeless sector, but also looking at the systems behind those that are failing to keep up with what the need and what the generational advancement needs to be. So I was able to, at a very young age, start to help run shelters and have conversations and bring together coalitions, and really just fell in love with it and saw this continued need and continued growth, and feel very passionate about being welcomed into community to try and make that change.
I feel like, and maybe it's just because I've been working with you on housing, but I feel like housing is something that we're talking about on a national level. There are a lot of states that are dealing with this issue. I think it's fairly new to Colorado to be this extreme what's happening, but I do feel like in other states, it's kind of happening everywhere.
It definitely is happening everywhere. It was, we were headed towards housing issues, and we've had them for years. I think in Colorado, those were fairly muted, unless you worked directly in that field, until really our pandemic. And that's when we started to really see all of these different pieces colliding. Nationally, you have states who've been facing, 1% of buildable land like Alaska or New York, housing crisis with prices like in California, for a long, long time, for generations. And so, I think you have states who've been doing this for quite a while, but this is the first time in our history that we've seen such a national understanding and universal crisis when it comes around housing in the last few decades. And Pew Research actually pointed out a couple years ago, this is still the highest polling need and highest polling topic in the nation right now. Is housing is the reason people are not stable.
So what has changed? Why is this happening now? Is it different than what was happening in the 80s and 90s?
I think we're just continuing to see, right? We've never kept up with the amount we need to be building. We've never, even in the 80s, even through the 90s, early 2000s, we were falling behind in the amount of housing we needed to produce in this nation. And we never caught up. And so at this point, we're seeing, especially in Colorado, we're seeing a lot of market rate housing coming in place and apartments that are $3,000 a month. That's not meeting the average Coloradans need. We see that across the nation. And it is really hard to catch up with generations of being behind in building housing. The money and the financing is not there. We are a nation that relies on low-income housing tax credits to build affordable housing, which is unbelievably competitive to get those tax credits to be able to ensure we have affordable housing and are able to offer that subsidy so that people can move in and not be paying more than 40, 50, 60% of their rent. And so our nation has not kept up with that need. We haven't expanded the tax credit. There's a national bill right now that looks at expanding our tax credits. That would be so impactful. We could serve so many more, but our nation hasn't done that in forever. And so we're really playing catch up. And it's creating a detrimental crisis that we're gonna see for quite a few years.
And it's not easy to solve. You and I work on this issue right now here in Colorado on state legislature. And what we see is pushback from cities and counties. I guess my frustration point is a lot of these cities and counties are frustrated with the fact that there's not enough housing, that the unhoused sprawl is happening across the state, really, even in rural parts. But when it comes to solutions, they push back on that growth. What is the mindset? How do we change that mindset?
I think I can see it from both angles, right? Because I get to work at the state and I get to work so closely with local levels. And I think, a lot of the mindset is how does something created at the state level truly understand what it's like in the Southeast and truly what it's like in the Southwest? And there are unique issues in all of these areas. There's unique availability of land, there's unique zoning, there's unique political will across those. But at the end of the day, changing some of these major things universally is going to make it easier for the production of housing. And so I think a lot of that, and you know that better than anyone, Alvina, is education and those one-on-one conversations of it can still be unique to your community. It can still serve who you think it needs to serve. But if we don't get rid of and we don't start to promote easier ways to build, you're going to lose your community. Your community can't afford to be there anymore. And so, it's an interesting, and there's always that balance of local government to state ordinance. And how do we not feel like we're treading on each other as we make those policies?
One, I think, innovative policy right now is housing near transportation areas. Colorado hasn't been, we're very much a car state. You need to have a car. The infrastructure on wide transportation isn't great. I guess what's your take on that option of building housing near major transportation in the state?
I think it's a huge game changer if we can get people to live near transportation. We are a very car-based state, especially in more rural areas. I think when we're looking at Denver metro areas, the more we can build on our amazing transportation infrastructure, the more we make availability for people to be able to get to other jobs and get better education and be in community, which is really hard when you live so far away. You don't have that ability. It makes it easier for kiddos to get to school if we're in transportation. It makes it easier for us to change the way that we live our lives. I think, it's such a beautiful thing to say, how do we start to build up the transportation in some of our rural, and I mean, really rural communities in Colorado to ensure that those who live there also have that livelihood and community. We've really, we see a lot more growth and communities in Colorado, especially in the Denver metro area, that are built around housing, transportation. You have food in the community. You have, you're really creating something that allows for sustainable life. And we need to move towards that because otherwise we end up with transportation deserts and food deserts, and it really keeps people struggling to find stability.
Let's kind of switch over to I know you're a mom of two, and there right now they're talking about these family benefits for depending on your income, the benefits. Now, the state got in trouble on how they're doing it. So, like, give me the background there. I didn't even know about this till yesterday. So, I want to hear your take.
Yes. So we have, in the state of Colorado, we have Tabor. And everyone every year gets a TABOR refunds. And the way that you refund that money can be blanketed. It's really that simple. And we've done that in our TABOR refunds. And so one of the proposals on the table right now is Bill 1311, which is based on a child tax credit. It's based on taking money from our TABOR refunds and increasing the amount of money we put in the households with kids. And the entire point of that is twofold. One, we have this excess money and we need to use it in a way that benefits Colorado. And second off, we can cut child poverty by 50% if we do that, which is huge. And it doesn't just focus, like most of the child tax credits, on our just lowest income. They will still receive it, but it really is focusing on this middle income who is sitting at a bar of, if I get a dollar more at my work, I lose my voucher or I lose my safety net programs. I can't save anything. I can't get other assets. It's not enough for me to sustain. So I become unstable and we become housing insecure or food insecure. And so the tax credit that's on the table is able to say, we're going to help buffer 95 households with $95,000 a year. And at this point, that means we're avoiding that cliff that is truly a safety net cliff across our nation, but we see it in Colorado. If you look just in Denver Metro, the last few years, we've had year over year 100% growth in unhoused families. These are working families. These are middle class families. We can't afford to live here. And so this tax credit allows for more money for housing or food or daycare, whatever that gap needs to be, to help people move forward in the sustainability of Colorado.
So that's interesting. This has come up in a few of my conversations that folks in this, even in this $100,000, a year job, they're still struggling to make ends meet. I mean, sometimes it feels like you go to the grocery store, you buy 4 things and it's like $80. Um, how do you how what are the solutions for those families that are kind of in that middle of the road income level?
Yeah, I mean the only solutions, right? Because you don't qualify for a lot of the safety net benefits that we have available in state and nationally if you are at that income level is really for us to try and pass more of these initiatives. So this childhood, tax credit that we're looking at, it's going to impact over 133,000 children, ages 5 and under.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because 5 and under, you're facing daycare, which as a mom yourself, I mean, daycare is so expensive. At 6, you can go into first grade and you have a bit more of a benefit of, having the education, the environment. The food is huge. Diapers are huge. Formula is huge. Formula had such a significant increase that there's been a huge national run on the need for increased TANF and the need for increased child well-being programs. And it is inflation and it is housing prices. And it's all of these things colliding together, which really do make it impossible. You can make $90,000 a year, but if your milk goes from $4 to $6 a gallon, and you have kids, it makes a difference on the bottom line of that budget. So we really are, with this bill that I've been so honored to be introduced to, we're really seeing proponents across the state come together to say we have to prioritize children.
So I want to get some advice since you've been a mom longer than I have.
Yes.
How do you balance like dealing with social issues, really seeing folks struggle, and then go home and be the best you can be for your kids? How do you balance that?
So, one of my things is that I am trained in trauma-informed care. And part of that is training yourself in holding that secondhand trauma. Because when we work in social issues, when we work with homelessness or domestic violence or poverty in general, you hear and see people's stories. And so one of the things that I always tell people is it doesn't minimize what you have. You can still go home and be grateful that you have this and be grateful for the fact that you are aware on a daily basis that you're going to help make change, because everyone deserves this. Everyone deserves to come home to a warm house at night, to be able to tuck their kids into a real bed and know that there's food on the table in the morning. Everyone deserves those things. And so being really aware of that is normal, and being able to be gracious with yourself and know that every day you're fighting for that system change, so that you're not coming home while people are outside. You're not coming home while people are choosing or having to choose between food and housing. And so, that's a hard balance. I think the other thing is that I've done with my kids, Alvina, is I've taught them all about what I do. I've taught them about, the luxuries that we have to be able to turn the heat up a little bit, and the luxuries we have to, no matter what, we have 3 meals a day on that table, and we have a car to get you to school. And that they grow up with this appreciation, understanding that our systems are not set up where there is equality in that. And as a mom, I feel like that is the most important thing I can do with my children, is have them grow up with that same understanding and respect for what we have, but outward facing movement to try and create that for others.
So I have a boy, but you have a girl. And so how are you teaching her about the world around her on a day-to-day basis?
Well, so my girl is my older. I do have a 6-year-old boy. And I think with both of them, I think my daughter is a little different. My daughter caught on at a very early age that women are fighting harder in this world. And so, having a single mom, she sort of had a different perspective growing up. And so teaching her about the world has really just been, trying to get her to see the full perspective, get her to see the power that women have and the structures of society that have really worked against children and women and people of color and for so long. And she's been able to grasp that really early on. My 6-year-old boy, and I started when my boy was your little kiddo's age, we started reading board books about social change and what we have and why is that different, and growing up just understanding that equality doesn't actually exist, and what it means to you is probably not what it means to the person next door. And so it, having those conversations, starting really low and talking about them on a level of, if I have this and sister has this, but you don't, how is that equal if you don't have this opportunity? And, really just trying to formulate their thought process based around that big world picture. And they catch on. They're smart kids.
Yeah, because I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I feel like there's a balance of you don't want to perpetuate it more by telling them how bad it is, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't, it's almost like the more something's in your head, the more of a reality it is, because you
Mhm.
want it to change. You want them to be the change makers.
Mhm.
But also you have to tell them the reality of right now. And then, like you said, those trauma tools that you described and how to deal with, because I'm sure just like you telling them what the real world is like is traumatic in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah, you definitely can't have the conversation that I can sit down with you, right, over a cup of coffee and just be like, wow, these things happened and look at the news. Um, I think the biggest piece for me, and I encourage it for all kids, is they're going to hear it, right? It's so much different than when I was a kid. They have kids in their class in 3rd grade with cell phones. Like, people are on YouTube and so their exposure to the outside world is so significant. The conversations have to happen, and they have to happen at a young age. And I think spinning them into, you have the choice to decide who you are and how you fit into this world and how you show up in these spaces. And you have the ability to help make the change, versus focusing on, there are people making bad choices, there are people refusing to change generations of bad choices, is so important, because it's not saying there are good people and bad people and look at the horrible things and the world is on fire, but more look at the opportunity. And you have within you the power to grasp that opportunity as you grow.
So what are your tools? Like when you turn off your computer and you're getting home, like mentally, what do you do to make that switch?
Um, well, I have to do a to-do list. I think part of that is, if you're running around, and especially if you're working in these fields, it's really hard for us to turn off that brain, because we know we have every day is another day. People are living in poverty or struggling with housing, or any of these fields that we work in. And so being able and making sure that I can take my day and write down everything that I think I need to do or that I want to follow up on, so I know that when I come back in the morning, it's right there. I can get right back to it, is really helpful. I think one of the things that we've lost, and I do a lot of this in our secondhand trauma trainings, is a lot of us work from home. So it is really hard. We don't have that drive to listen to music or put on a
Yeah,
podcast or do some
totally agree.
breathing. Yep. And so it's finding that thing. So for me, I like to go take a walk, or I like to do something that's going to break up before I re-engage with. And now I'm cooking dinner, and now we're doing homework, and now we're moving on to the next home life things, because I don't have that half the time. I don't get that hour in traffic to decompress. And so really being aware of that, because I think people see working from home as a phenomenal way to gain back some hours to do work and be productive, but we also lost what forced us to detach. And so, really finding that thing, whether it's taking a hot shower or going for a jog or Netflix and chill for 30 minutes, whatever it is, to be able to decompress before you can show up more fully in that next stage.
I feel like we went on a tangent because I wanted to go. I kind of want to go back to housing again. So when you're talking to your kids about housing and like the unhoused, there's so many stigmas related to folks that are unhoused. How are we breaking those stigmas with young people, with older folks who have a different perception of the unhoused? And how do we talk about it like in a sense of community? What's the right way to talk about the issue?
I think the reframe that really needs to be there is that these have always been our unhoused neighbors. More so in the last decade, they have literally become your unhoused neighbor. And so, I think it's important for adults, that you're able to read through some of the published reports that talk to you about, we're seeing more unhoused families. We're seeing more unhoused seniors at this time than we ever had, because baby boomers
Interesting.
are aging into Social Security, which is not enough to cover rent. So we have individuals who are hardworking adults who have worked for 65, 70, 75 years who can't afford to sustain, and they are ending up on the street. We are seeing expanding unhoused populations because people can't afford their home. They can't afford rent. They can't afford to live and eat at the same time. And so there is this stigma that everybody is chronically homeless. Everybody is dealing with addiction, and everyone is dealing with mental illness. And we do. We have a horrible mental illness crisis in our country. It changed with Reagan. We put people out on the streets, and it hasn't been fixed by, bipartisan, hasn't been fixed, right? We haven't focused enough on that. But that is not the major populations we're seeing. And if you look at the data across the nation and in
Yeah.
Colorado, those that we're seeing are our seniors and our families and our working poor and our middle income that are falling into housing insecurity. I think with kiddos, you have to have a really high level conversation. So, my kids and I, like I said, we talk a lot about, and I do this, within their classrooms as well. We talk a lot about how we each come from different backgrounds, and when you go to work and when you make money, it's not all balancing. And so when housing is so expensive, and when heat is so expensive, and people's heat bills are going up by hundreds of dollars a month, and when food is going up by hundreds of dollars a month, it doesn't balance out. And we play with money, and we play with, if you have this much money and you have to choose between these things, what would you choose? And time over time, kids will choose food, and time over time, kids will choose warmth, but you have to make those choices. And so we start to have those conversations. I also think kids are seeing people on the street. My kids they know what I do, and they've come to pallet shelters, and, they have a unique experience, I think. But my kids realize every day that there are more and more people and more kids on the street, on street corners, in
Yeah.
tents, and they see them. We see them going to the store, right? And so being able to say, this is that moment where we need to realize how fortunate we are and what can we do to create the change, because we are one medical bill or one crisis away, and we could be that. So we need to appreciate what we have and make sure that we're doing everything in our ability to help. And I think that that message doesn't change when I talk to adults. It stays the same, right? You are literally one cancer diagnosis. You are one car accident. You are one landlord deciding they're going to sell the building away from instability. You just maybe don't realize that.
Yeah, I mean it's changed so much from, the 80s hobo to now, like you said, you walk down the street and it looks like somebody's belongings are literally taken out of their apartment and they're trying to figure out what's next for them. So what does Community Investment Alliance do when when somebody approaches Community Investment Alliance, what is your next step with them? How do you work with them?
As a person or as like a community?
Like as an organization, what is the work specifically?
Yeah, so we do we do everything from community-based education. So we've gone into a lot of our communities around Colorado and really held community forums on education of homelessness, education of addiction, education of the best practices to address, the best solutions to address. And then we work with communities when it comes to homelessness to really look at where are your gaps and what do we need to put in to a community to sustain and bring forth change. And so, we've gone into communities and we've helped put bridge programming in place, which is for individuals who we want to catch them before they ever become homeless. We know that they're going to fall out because their landlord's raising the rent, or they're, on Social Security now and it doesn't cover whatever it might be. We want to catch them and put them in a hotel, match them with rapid rehousing vouchers, private money, and then rehouse them and make sure they have the resources to sustain. We've gone into communities and built pallet shelters. We have a system in our nation for our unhoused that is not there to meet these needs. They are not family-based shelter systems, even though we have amazing organizations in
Yeah.
Colorado that does that, but they're not family-based. They're, men and women separate. You can't go in as a couple. You can't go in with dogs. If you are moving out of your home with your kids as a single mom with dogs or single dad with dogs or couple, you can't find a place to go. And so we help create
Right.
alternative solutions to those issues. And then we do everything all the way through building affordable housing. We're working really closely with congregations statewide who are fascinated by taking their ministry and putting it external to the four walls of a church, who say we have land and we want to build affordable housing and do our outward facing ministry. And so we do everything from permanent supportive housing, which is going to serve your hardest to serve, all the way through middle income and workforce housing to make sure that communities don't lose those vital aspects of their workforce that they want to keep right now because of housing costs.
And we have this extra layer of the migrant crisis happening in Colorado. How is that disrupting or adding to the work that you've been focused on?
Well, I had the privilege to do a lot of migrant work at the border in 2018 and 2019. And, I think we've seen this shift to putting people on buses and sending them to places and hoping that they can, again, get their asylum paperwork and get everything in order and figure it out. In Denver, there were 4,500 people in the shelters 2 weeks ago. And those shelters are, the community centers and the different areas that they've set up. And, they're humans who want to work, that most of them would take a job tomorrow if we could get over that hurdle of employment. They're children who have gone through very violent homes and transitioned away. And that transition is a very violent transition. It's usually a very unsafe migration. Many people get injured, they lose family, and they are now here in their own states of trauma looking for that dream that we offer, that we all have the opportunity when we're born in the US to just have. And it's been an interesting impact to see not only those who have welcomed, helped kiddos get into school or serving the communities, but it is, and we all know this, we live in Denver and other areas, it's impacting the budgets. It's impacting our ability to focus. I think, Mayor Johnson's done in Denver a really good job at maintaining focus on homelessness while also trying to maintain focus on migration, knowing that everything we do in Colorado comes from the same pots of money, whether you're doing private foundations and
Yeah.
grants, it's all competitive. And so, I think we have so many people in need. I do think that, again, if we sort of have this opportunity for job placements and work, but it all comes back to housing, right? It all comes back to, we still don't have the housing available at an affordable level, even if we can get migrants employed at this time. So it's a really significant problem. And I don't, while I'm happy to help advise and go down and file paperwork, I think, like most people in Colorado right now, Alvina, it's kind of this up in the air question of, how do we possibly do more? How can we shift anything to do more?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I've seen a lot of great community work. I mean, people just making sandwiches and dropping them off at the hotels and doing everything they can. So it is really heartwarming to see that. Of course, we wish that there were systems in place that individuals didn't have to spend extra time doing that. But obviously, it's great to see a lot of folks in the Denver community embracing and doing what they can to support the migrant crisis. And as you said, the migrant crisis and the unhoused issue are two separate issues, but they're getting like conflated and mixed together. And, I think that, like you said, Mayor Johnston's approach has been great. His speech on budget cuts, which are unfortunate, was really heartwarming, because what we have to realize is that it's humanity, whether it's unhoused, whether it's migrants, whatever community, it's all about humanity. So we are wrapping up. If I want to wrap up with a call to action, if folks want to get involved on housing, what is the best way they can help Community Investment Alliance and or other organizations in Colorado?
Yeah. Reach out. We're happy. We have individuals who want to volunteer when it comes to housing solutions and physically building housing. And we partner with organizations that do that. As the Community Investment Alliance, we do a lot of systems change advocacy and community meetings. And we welcome individuals to not only reach out to participate in those, but if you want one for your community, if you feel like your community would want to sit down and have those conversations, we are happy to come in and have them. And as always, I think it is so important that we as community members remember that our voices are the strongest when it comes to policy and systems change and being able to move the dial there. And so, happy to have people reach out. We can teach you how to be engaged. We can talk about how you write testimonies, send letters, how to do these different things. But we really need that community voice at the local level and the state level so that we can start to make the change.
Totally agree. Well, thanks, Kathleen, for spending time with me today. Of course, I'll probably talk to you later today.
Absolutely. Anytime.
As we tackle on these housing issues.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalkshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.